This is Bible School Radio, KDKR, Decatur, Dallas, Fort Worth, KYJC, Commerce, and KMWC, Bethany. Portions of KDKR programming do not necessarily reflect the views of this station, its management, or staff.
Prudent Money with Bob Brooks is sponsored by the Prudent Money Foundation on 91.3.
Well, can we really save money by spending money on our car? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for the special Car Corner edition of Prudent Money. Good afternoon, this is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Tony Joe's with me as he is every Wednesday for the special Car Corner edition of Prudent Money. We'd love to hear from you today if you've got a question and or a comment. The number is 1-877-913-5357, 1-877-913-5357. You can also go to the website at www.prudentmoney.com. Send a question into the to the link at the top of the page, and I'll get you taken care of. That's off the website, www.prudentmoney.com. 1-877-913-5357. So, Tony Joe, we're, which is unbelievable to me, in August, beginning of August, and really this summer hasn't been, you always use the barometer, it's not been that hot, has it?
Nothing like last.
Oh, wait a minute, hang on, let me turn you up. There we go.
It is absolutely nothing like last summer.
I don't really even remember last summer.
Oh, I do.
Yeah, I'll bet you
Well,
don't.
when you have to come to work and turn the thermometer, the thermostat up a couple of degrees because you're chilly in the building,
Yeah.
I can see why you wouldn't remember last summer.
It's been a little, I had to do that the other day.
Okay, now you're just teasing me. Here it is, 108, and you're turning up the thermostat a couple of degrees because you're chilly.
So I got a question for you. How do you stay cool in the garage like that? I mean,
Well, it's like I've explained before, to a lot of folks. We have a lot of shady characters that hang around.
okay. And on that note, I'm going to talk to Nick on line one. Nick, thanks for saving me from the onslaught of new jokes. What's on your mind today?
That's right. I've got two jokes for you, but hey, I'm starting to charge for my jokes, so I'm only going to do one today, and I'll do one next time.
Okay.
Give you a chance to
we'll
earn
go
more
for that.
commissions. But first, my question on the car. Tony Joe, you'll recall about 6 years ago, I called down to the university could answer the question on this, which let me just say to the audience, I mean, this guy solves problems nobody else can solve. My car was, my old 1998 Honda Accord was going down the road and literally just stopping. The engine was just going dead in the middle of the road. So I called around various places and people said, well, could be they might have to remove the gas tank, this, that, and the other. Tony Joe says, yeah, it's the electrical component of the ignition. You remember that? Does that ring a bell with you?
Probably. Yeah. You know, it happens a lot on Hondas. It was a common issue. Yeah.
All right. New day, possible same problem. Probably about 3 times in the last 3 months, I've gone out to my car, and the battery's fine, the alternator's fine, and turn the key, and I might get just a slight click. No turnover, absolutely nothing. And it just goes kaplunk and, doesn't crank.
Okay.
So that happened to me recently. Does that mean the electrical component's probably about to go out again? Or
No.
Any ideas on that?
No, that doesn't sound like the same thing. Let me explain why. If you heard somewhat of a noise of any kind, a click, a little thunk, a little noise, that means the electrical switch is actually sending power to the starter, which because I'm a mechanic and I got to do things quick in my head, that eliminates the neutral safety switch. Is it a stick shift or a manual?
No, it's automatic.
Okay. I'm sorry, yeah, automatic.
Yeah,
So it eliminates the neutral safety switch, the ignition switch, the battery cables, the posts, all the connections. That tells me we're getting power to the starter solenoid, and it's clicking and making some kind of an effort, but it's not starting. More than likely...
I wouldn't let me just clarify. I mean, it was like one little click and that's it.
Yeah.
There's no, you know how there's a lot of times there's a lot of clicking when your battery's dead?
Mhm.
Didn't do that at all. There's one click and that's it.
Yep. Well, that sounds like the starter solenoid is clicking, but it doesn't have enough current to turn over the engine, which is going to generally be in the starter itself. Or I should say it could be a bad battery cable, a dirty cable, a bad ground, something like that. But we're sending power to the starter assembly, so we know that. Now, here's what we can do to try to diagnose it. Next time this happens, try to be in the frame of mind that you're going to let up, you're going to hit it again, let up, hit it again. Keep doing that and see if the car starts. If it does, more than likely, it's starter time. That click that you're hearing will generally is caused from high resistance. And if you keep trying it every couple of seconds, you keep hitting it, and then all of a sudden it starts, that's only because you're lowering the resistance enough to pass enough current through to allow the starter to turn over. And that's a pretty good way to diagnose the problem. Of course, you may find out that it gets no results. By the way, how are you getting it started eventually?
Well, I did that. I was about to go somewhere the other night about 7 p.m. and I went out and it did that. And I thought, well, I'll be darned, my battery somehow gone dead. So I just got out of the car. It wasn't no urgent need to go anywhere. And I went out the next morning to make sure the battery cables were loose so I could drive it, get a jump and drive it over to Costco and get a new battery. And loosened the cable, the clamps on the cable just.
Hey, Nick, you're going in and out of your phone there. Make sure you're speaking into the mouthpiece.
Can you hear better now?
Yeah, I can hear it.
Okay. I went out and loosened the cables a little bit so that I could just pull it off when I got to Costco.
Mm-hmm.
And long story short, the car and thought, well, I'll just try to. It is one of the wires on the battery terminal. What do you think?
Hey, Nick, we're really having a tough time hearing you.
Hold on, let me walk outside. Did you hear me say the next morning I went out and tried to get it ready for the drive over to Costco, and I loosened it? Okay. I loosened everything up so I could just pull it off at Costco and put in a new battery. And I decided to get back in the car and try to crank it again, and it cranked right up. No problem whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking, from what Tony Joe just said, is it possible it's just a loose connection on the battery? Because, I mean, the clamps on there are basically pretty tight.
Yeah, but how about the wires going into the clamps? The big cables going into the clamps, are they tight and clean? See,
okay, that's
the thing that confused. Yeah, what I'm curious about is you moved things. You disturbed the evidence, so to speak. You moved the cables back and forth. When you did that, all of a sudden it started. Right. So if you were to kind of try that again, if it does it again on you, simply move the cables around and see if it starts good. Then we got to look at the problem right there. There's something wrong with the connections. There's either corrosion in there, they're not tight, they're not clean. Something's wrong right there, because all you got to do is wiggle it around and it starts. So that's how we diagnose things. That's how you can help point me in the right direction.
So you're saying anytime you diagnose something, Tony Joe, you just kind of wiggle around a little bit and that gets you there?
Oh, no, don't get the wrong idea. I use hammers and all kinds of
He's MacGyver.
I use all kinds of devices. The highly technical...
You ever have your dancing girls that you keep out at the shop, like help you with stuff like that to wiggle around?
Dancing girls? No, I can't afford that.
Okay, well, let's wrap this up. All right, Nick, do you have the answer to your question?
Yeah, you want to hear the joke real quick?
As long as it's clean.
Oh, of course, always. You guys are, kind of familiar with general legal terms and all that. Somebody dies, for example, and say, well, you can't, they go to the funeral and say, well, he had a lot of money, but you can't take it with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've heard that. Okay.
Sure.
Well, this really rich guy died, and the lawyer's getting ready to, do the reading of the will. And so the people come in, they're kind of expecting to get a lot of money, and the lawyer had been really busy. He said, "Look, guys, I gotta take a quick look at this. I normally read it ahead of time, but let me look through it real quick before I tell you all the results." And so the lawyer's sitting there, and he reads for a minute, and finally gets kind of a perplexed look on his face. Said, "Hold on, let me read this again." Everybody's anxiously waiting to see what kind of millions they're getting, and he reads it one more time, and he says, "Huh." He looks up and said, "He took it with him."
That's good.
That's good, Nick. How much is that gonna? How much are you gonna charge for that one?
Oh, well, that's kind of like the veterinary clinics where you bring your cat in the first time. The first one's free, but next time it's going to kill you.
Right.
But you're rich. You and Bob are both rich, so you can pay it. And my next show's going to be a whole.
Hey, well, let's save it for later. How about that?
Yeah,
right.
He's going to save it for next time.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Appreciate your call.
Y'all behave yourselves. Bye.
This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Special Car Corner edition of Prudent Money. I would think that it would be tough, and you tell me, to diagnose a battery, because there's a lot of little things that could be contributing to it working or not working.
It is. Yeah, that's why we have to have some form of equipment to get some kind of voltage and current reading on a battery before you can just guess at it. It's pretty expensive to put one in and be wrong. I mean, they're $150 now, so I'd rather just measure things, take my time, and put the time in up front to do the diagnosis first.
So how long does an average battery actually typically last?
Around here, what I mean is here in this northern part of Texas, with the hot summers we have, about 3 years is my experience. No matter how many years the guarantee is on the battery, after about 3 years, you really need to get it tested and stay on it, because it can turn on a dime. You can get up one cold morning, first cold snap we have, and you're going to be calling a tow truck or getting a jump start.
So it could look perfectly one day and then be dead the next.
Correct.
This is Bob Brooks. You are listening to the Special Car Corner edition of Prudent Money. 1-877-913-5357. We'll be right back. Hello, this is Bob Brooks. Proverbs 22:3 and Proverbs 27:12 are the exact same verse word for word. I call them the stewardship verses of risk. A prudent person foresees danger and takes precautions. The simpleton goes blindly on and suffers the consequences. On the Prudent Money Radio Show, we teach about risk, how to identify it, how to figure it out, and what to do about it. We believe that to be a prudent steward, you have to be a good risk manager. Listen to the Prudent Money Radio Show on Bible School Radio 91.3. Prudent Money, home of the modern-day steward movement.
Hi, I'm Steve DeWitt, pastor and Bible teacher on The Journey. The Christian life is a marathon, and marathons call for perseverance and endurance. That's why each day on The Journey, I share practical truth from God's Word so you can be encouraged to press toward the finish line. Join me, Steve DeWitt, for The Journey as I equip you with the power of God's Word.
Monday through Saturday at 4:30 p.m. here on Bible School Radio 91.3.
This is Rob Randall, your host and teacher of the Invisible War radio program. The Invisible War is the study of God's Word on how to walk in Christ's victory in the spiritual battles we face against the powers of darkness. Join me every Sunday morning at 9 right here on KDKR and KYJC in Commerce, your station for life.
Welcome back. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Special Car Corner edition of Prudent Money. 1-877-913-5357. You know, Tony Joe, and you've talked about this many times through the years, but they thought it would be worth talking about it again, just mentioning it, is, sometimes Nick was talking about his battery. Sometimes it's not the battery, it's the alternator. And how do you go about... Or let me say this, as a person who, as a driver of the automobile, how do you tell if it is the alternator versus the battery?
Well, one of the first things that you can do from the pilot seat, so to speak, is to learn how the warning light system works on your particular dashboard. What I mean by that is when you turn the key on, there is, in every car, there's what we call a prove-out procedure, and what that really means is all the warning lights come on to make sure that you have a visual warning, such as you don't have a burned out light bulb. So the prove out on the dash is when you first initially turn the key on, before you start the car, you're going to see all these lights light up. And it seems like a lot, but they're really easy to understand. You can get your book out and you can go through them, or you can look them up online. It's important that you know what each one of these lights represents. They have funny signs. Sometimes you can't figure out what the sign is, so you got to look it up. But once you realize that these lights are there to warn you, and there's a good reason for them, then every time you're driving down the road, if a light comes on, you will know what it means. And the reason I bring that up is because if you see a battery light, or it could say GEN, G-E-N, it could say ALT, alternator, it could say charging system. There's so many different labels on different models that you just have to know your own particular dashboard setup, and it takes 2 minutes to look everything up with your manual. So if you're driving down the road and you see the charging system light come on, you can pretty much suspect your alternator is failing and it's time to get it looked at.
So when you say that light comes on, does that come on at 20% left, or
No,
like the gas
Okay.
light?
Good question. No, this is not an index that runs down on an interval from a clock or a mileage clock. This is a warning light. And for instance, with the charging system, it's a pretty important system. And once the charging system stops charging the battery, depending on whether it's night and you have the headlights on and the wipers going and the radio going and the air conditioner going, electrical demand. How much are you using from the battery? Because the battery is no longer receiving any recharging current. It is only giving out. So how long is it going to be able to give out meet these electrical needs before the battery dies? And when the battery dies, the car dies. Now you're getting towed. So for the reason that it's an important system, you will notice that the light is going to be a red indicator light. And we've talked about it before, where the more important ones light up red, the less important light lights up amber, just like on an intersection. So you're driving down the road, and all of a sudden your charging light or generator light or battery light, it depends on what it's labeled. If you see the light on, that's a warning sign to you. And as the pilot of that vehicle, you're looking at all the gauges and you're saying, wow, here we go. We better get this into the mechanic and see what's wrong, because if I keep driving it, I'm going to end up stuck somewhere. So to answer your question, that's how you can be aware that there's something going on with the alternator, the charging system in general, whether it's a battery, a connection, an actual alternator problem, or anything in between. I mean, you need to get it tested, or, you're not going to have long before you're going to be sitting on the side of the road.
So tell me this, in a situation where you've misdiagnosed it, or you didn't even think about looking at the alternator.
Okay.
You had a battery that was a year old. You thought, this battery's gone out, so I'll get a new one.
Okay.
You get the new battery. It runs the battery down. How many times can a battery with a brand new battery withstand that kind of temperature, that kind of situation, and once you get the alternator fixed, still last like it would if it was brand new? Does that make sense?
Yes, and the answer to your question is you can run it down quite a few times. I mean, it is possible for you to misdiagnose it and the battery goes dead again, or in the instance, Bob, even better than that, of like a drain on the battery where there's some electrical drain on the battery, and when you go home at night, shut your car off, go inside, it's still taking power from the battery and running the battery down so that in the morning you get up and it won't start. Battery parasitic drains or parasitic draws are common. It happens. And you can fight with one I've fought with them for, a week to 10 days before I figured it out sometime. And the battery goes dead every time.
Right.
So to answer your question, a good, brand new, good battery that's healthy, you can run it down and charge it up. I mean, you can charge it. I mean, you take a little life out of it every time, but If it's strong and healthy, fairly new, you can deal with it time and time again, and it'll come back every time. It'll work once you get the problem solved.
Now, you were saying a second ago about it always depends on where you live. And I guess it's the heat that gets to the battery as the biggest problem.
Around here, yes.
Yeah, that's correct.
Mm-hmm.
So what, in this type of environment, why is that the case? I mean, why is the heat the one element?
Heat is the biggest killer of automobile systems that there is. Heat, think about the engine heat at an average of 220 degrees when the car's warmed up. The transmission is the same temperature. You've got the air conditioning running under the hood. Now, keep in mind this hood is closed, so you've got this enclosed compartment with all these heat-generating devices, engine, air conditioning. All these things are developing heat, and then the battery is sitting there in this environment. So the battery doesn't really like big changes of weather. It doesn't like extremes. So the underhood temperature of the car is 300 degrees or more, and that poor battery is sitting there, and at night when you come home, it cools down to air temperature, which could be, say, on an average overnight, it's 75 degrees, okay? So it goes from 75 back up during the day, back up to this really hot environment, and it does this day in and day out until eventually the battery itself plates become sulfated, the sulfuric acid that's mixed with the water can actually boil away, be vented away in the form of steam. So it's getting low on its electrolyte. It's getting hot every day. The plates begin to sulfate. Sediment falls to the bottom of the sediment trap, and the battery builds up like a little anthill until finally 2 plates short together. So now you've got a battery with a dead cell. You've got problems with not only heat, but sometimes the battery is not strapped down properly. It is not supported correctly. Somebody's in a hurry and they don't, fasten it correctly. So every time you go around corners, that battery moves around and, pulls on the cables and gets damaged just from physical abuse.
So do you think that at some point they'll come up with better technology that handles the heat a little bit better in parts of the country like this? Or
this is why we have different batteries now. You're thinking of the old-style lead-acid battery. Well, it's still a lead-acid battery, but the AGM-type gel cells, there's different technologies already trying to battle this condition. So far, I'm not impressed, but, we got to keep working on it. Battery technology is something we need desperately, better technology.
So when you're considering this heat, and it gets, which is just amazing to me, because I think you said how hot could it get underneath the hood?
How hot could it get?
Yeah.
600 degrees.
Yeah, it's just amazing to me.
It's unusual to get that high, but it could.
That parts of an engine would still work effectively in that kind of heat.
Well, think about the engine itself is operating. The air around it is maybe 300 or 400 degrees. The engine itself operates at 220, and then it has a cooling system known as, the radiator and the water. The cooling system keeps it around that temperature, so it doesn't go into melt zone. It would just melt away.
So from the standpoint of the heat, the battery's probably the most sensitive.
Gets a lot of abuse. It's in a bad environment all the time.
This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thanks so much for joining me today. I do appreciate it. Do you know, Tony Joe, we actually podcast. You know what a podcast is, right?
Mm-hmm. You explained it to me. When you're fishing and you throw out near the lily pads, because
anyway,
the bass are hanging right there.
Sorry I asked. A podcast, if you missed the program or you want to listen to it any time that you, a better time, then you can go to prudentmoney.com. You can go to Apple. You can go to just about any platform that does produce that you listen to your podcast right now. We'll be there. So just search it out, and you can always catch up on the program. I noticed when you told
I'm going to go to Apple and try that.
I noticed that when you told your 2 boys that, they weren't that impressed.
No, they weren't. They really weren't. It's hard to impress them.
They are your main employees, aren't they?
Well, yeah, they're the main employees. But first, people go, do they work here? And I said, well, define work.
This is Bob Brooks. You got a question for me? Please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time. Keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.